And when we are in the process of a truth, we are transforming our human condition in something more, something which is in the proximity of another time. When we become a part of the new body of a truth, we are something like an eternal subject. And finally, the question of political field is the question of relation between individual and subject. And it is a question of difference between individual and subject. A political subject is a new creation. A political subject is something which happens to the world. It's not the realization of what is possible. It's something new, and as something new, something which before was impossible. And when we participate to that sort of process, the whole word for that was revolution, you know. When we participate at that sort of process, we become a subject. We become something else than a pure individual. And we become something else as a relation between individual and culture. We become a part of a new subject. Political subject, artistical subject, subject of love, and so on. And you understand that something like that is beyond the war between happiness and sacrifice. It's beyond the war between enjoyment and death. Or if you want, it's beyond the war between death and death. What is the contemporary war between two types of death, finally? The death by sacrifice and the death by nihilism. And this war of death and death, the death of limited and imperialist democracy and archaic reaction, this war, we have to go beyond this war. But it's impossible to go beyond this war without the notion and the conception of difference between individual culture and truth, or between expressive definition of individual and incorporation of the individual to a new truth. And so, if it is something beyond the war, it's a way of peace. It's a real way of peace. And we have to find a new way for peace. A peace which is not only the end of the war, but a peace which is beyond the war itself. You know, we have today a question of what is really peace. Peace is not the contrary of war. Peace is something which is beyond the war. And the key is to be inside a truth, inside the process of a truth, inside a new subject, to become a part of a new subject. And so we have to be inside the truth, and we have not to receive the truth from outside. We have to be a part of the becoming of a new truth, of a new political subject, and not to receive passively from outside this subject. And maybe this conception is more poetic than purely philosophic. I think the conception of incorporation to a new truth, the conception of possibility of something impossible, the conception of the becoming of something eternal, in time itself, in the real of the time, is, for the moment, a poetic conception. It is why I want to finish by a quotation of one of your great American poets, who is Wallace Stevens. Wallace Stevens, a good example of correlation between poetry and philosophy. It's a quotation in the great poem An Ordinary Evening in New Haven. Read this poem. It's very difficult, but very interesting. An Ordinary Evening in New Haven. And Wallace Stevens writes this: the search for reality is as momentous as the search for God. The search for reality is as momentous as the search for God. It is the philosopher's search. The philosopher's search for an interior made exterior. For an interior made exterior. And the poet's search is for the same exterior made interior. The search for reality is as momentous as the search for God. It is the philosopher's search for an interior made exterior. And the poet's search for the same exterior made interior. And you know, a truth, finally, a truth for me, and generally speaking, a truth is that sort of movement from outside to inside. That is not the creation of a new subject. Is when something which is absolutely outside, social conditions, different cultures, individuals, and so on, becomes something which is inside, becomes the process of a new subject, is really the becoming inside something of all the external world. And in the classical political theory, you have that. Because all the external world becomes the political consciousness, the revolutionary consciousness. And so the revolutionary subject is, in fact, the becoming of inside something from outside. And the truth is really that sort of movement, when outside becomes inside. But you know that for Wallace Stevens, that sort of movement is not the philosophical one, but the poetical one. The philosopher's search is from inside to outside. And the poetic movement is to outside from inside. And it is what I say that probably I am searching a poetic philosophy or a philosophic poetry, something like that. Passage from outside to inside. Transmutation, transfiguration of all what is outside in an eternal inside. And what's more, the equivalent for today of something which has existed, something like the revolutionary consciousness, but for our present, after the failure of the classical conception of revolutionary politics. And democracy, profound democracy, deep democracy, new democracy, is that sort of collective creation of this eternal inside. That is, I think, the possibility of a new creation for us, to understand that today we have to find the new conception of a movement from outside to inside. Because today, generally, we are under the law of outside, and inside is lost in outside. And we have to reappropriate outside for inside, and that is a political movement